Hello, family, friends, and fellow sojourners. In my last blog, I showed you pictures of our family, the dynamics in 1991, 1992. And as you can see, most of the pictures were of Ryan. This was about a year after we got him, and how much better he was doing. He was secure, he was so sweet, and not that he didn't have his problems and not that we didn't struggle with some of the issues, but I had promised him, and foolishly so, that he would never have to see his birth parents again, because I didn't believe that the authorities would ever have him face them again. But I was wrong. When his birth mother got out of prison, DHS insisted that she have parental supervision, and Ryan took a nosedive. He slid backwards so fast when he had to face her again, scared to death of her and all. And it was a total recall of all the things that she and his birth father had done, and saw a real negative impact. We had the Department of Human Services come in and interview us, interview Ryan, and apparently the last visit that he had was when she introduced a super soaker toy to him, and he wanted nothing to do with it. Now we're talking about a 4-year-old child that turned down something that a 4-year-old child would be excited about, but he wanted nothing from her. He wanted nothing to do with her. And that was the last time he had to see her. Then we had to go to court, and I kept having visions of what I thought was Bernie fighting for him. I envisioned in my dream that I was in the front seat of a station wagon. Ryan was in the middle seat, and the trunk of the station wagon was open. It was actually a Dodge Caravan. So Bernie was at the back of the car, and Ryan was in the middle, and I had one arm like this, and Bernie had the other arm, and I was tugging on him because he kept saying, "He's mine, give him to me." Ooh, still sends shivers up my spine. And I was pulling on him and saying, "You can't have him, he belongs to the Lord." And I realize now that that was not Bernie that was in my dream. It was Satan himself that was pulling on him. He had big plans for Ryan. And I was insistent that God had his hand on him and that he couldn't touch him anymore. And so that was a nightmare, a recurring nightmare that I had for quite a while. So when we had to go to court, I kept thinking, I don't want to face this man. I'd never met him, didn't even have pictures of him, knew nothing about him. But on the other hand, I had access to Monica's rap sheet. And when she said that she was an innocent victim in all of this, that her husband was the one that was doing it and she was just guilty by association, her rap sheet was about this thick. And when she was arrested, when she was pregnant with Ryan, she was sitting on a loaded .357 Magnum. So she was not honest with us in any way. So I was afraid to go to court and to face them, quaking in my boots basically. And every time that we were supposed to go to court, something would get postponed. So I didn't have to face them. I didn't have to face him. But it was a real trial. It was a real scary event, knowing that at some point we were going to have to fight to keep custody of Ryan and to adopt him. Well, one of the situations that we had with Ryan was that the counselor told us that in order for us to adopt Ryan, we had to let him know that we were not his real parents. And I'll never forget, and I argued with him. I said, I think if we tell him anything different at this point in his life, it's going to undo everything we've done. And the counselor said, "You've got to tell him the truth." Well, we were sitting down on the floor with Ryan in my lap, and there was a big eraser board in front of us. And the counselor drew a picture, stick figures of me and Gary. And Then over to the right, there was, or over to the left, there was stick figures of Monica and Bernie. And Ryan was in the middle. And he said, Ryan, I want to show you something. He said, this is your mom and dad, and this is Monica and Bernie. And I want to show you something. And he took a line and he drew his stick figure over to Monica and Bernie. And Ryan said, that's not true. And he looked up at me, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. He said, Mom, you tell him that I came out of your tummy. And I said, Ryan, you didn't. And he said, then you're the one that kidnapped me? He was so confused and so lost. He just didn't know where he belonged or who he was supposed to be with or why things happened the way they did. It was just really, really hard on him. Well, when we went to court for the last time, Monica and Bernie did not show up to have their parental rights severed or to discuss what was best for Ryan. And the judge threw up his hand and said, I'm done with these people. It's obvious they don't want him. Mr. and Mrs. Hoskins, if you want to adopt him, Ryan is up for adoption. So we were elated. We were so joyous that Ryan was not going to have to go back to them. And we just were going to pick up the pieces. But one of the things that Ryan struggled with was his name. He said, we told him, I said, Ryan, we're going to change your name because that's what this counselor who foolishly showed that diagram, he said, you're going to have to change his whole name. Otherwise, he's always going to be in danger of being found. So I just could not figure out what to name him. I played around with different names. I knew we were going to change his last name, obviously. But Ryan was convinced that he wanted to be called Jack Hoskins. And I thought that was so cute. It's like, Ryan, you don't even look like a Jack. But he was insistent. And one day he came storming through the house as I was walking down the stairs with my neighbor. And he yelled, I hate my name and I hate you. And he went into his room and he slammed the door. And my neighbor said, I don't know how you do this. And I said, God's grace is sufficient. And so I struggled with the fact that he was trying to find his own identity. But what he didn't know was that God chose his name. It wasn't Monica, it wasn't Bernie, but God chose his name. Because when we changed his name on his birth certificate to Ryan Hoskins, and I'll not let you know what the middle name was, but I was struggling with issues, and one day I was talking to my son, our son Andrew, who was getting in big trouble at the time. He was acting out. He was very confused about what was going on with Ryan, went through a lot of emotional stuff. He didn't get the counseling that he needed. And I sat there and I said, you know, Ryan or Andy, you have to make sure that you're a good example to your little brother. I said, Ryan adores you and he adores your father. And I said, and do you want to be a good example so that, because Ryan will be a culmination of who you are and who your dad is. So as I was talking to Andrew, Gary came up the stairs and he said, oh, I forgot, I have to show you something. And he showed me something that changed everything. And it verified that Ryan was supposed to be in our life from the very beginning. Before Gary was even born, before Andy was even born, Ryan was to be right in the middle of our family. So I went into his bedroom after this big blow up that he'd had. And I said, Ryan, do you know how special you are? And he said, no. And I said, Ryan, God chose your name. He said, how do you know that? And I showed him what the Lord had showed my husband. Very simple, but very profound. Hold on 1 minute. I'm sitting on my tablet. If you take my husband's name and Andy's name. Ryan is right in the very center. And if that doesn't show you that God's in control of all things, I don't know what else I can say. I hope you can read my writing. But I thought it was profound. And Ryan said, that means he loves me. And I was meant to be in your family from the very beginning. I hope this story has blessed you. God bless you, my friends. Bye-bye.